Good afternoon, everybody, and warm welcome to this panel discussion about relocating to Sweden to pursue an academic career. My name is Per Runesson. I'm professor of computer science at Lund University, and since the beginning of this year, I am chair of the WASP Diversity and Inclusion Group, DIG. The DIG works on assignment from the WASP leadership to increase the gender balance and to improve diversity and belonging in WASP. Today, we will focus on international recruitment to Sweden in academia, from the perspective of joining Swedish universities and from university leadership perspective, on barriers and mitigation strategies. To lead the discussion, we have a very qualified and experienced person indeed, Professor Ami Lutfi. She is the director of WASP, former chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Group, and herself an internationally recruited to Sweden. Before I hand over to Ami to introduce the panel members, I just want to add that you may write questions in the chat, and if we have set up the Zoom seminarium correctly, and we will bring them up towards the end of the panel discussion if time allows. With that said, I hand over to Ami Lutfi.
Great, thank you so much, Pat, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm so happy that we are having this seminar. It is on a very timely topic, both from an international perspective, but also from a WASP perspective. As many of you know, WASP has entered now its 10th year. And when we look at the recruitments that we've made, we really have recruitments from all over the globe that have joined WASP. So it's very important for us to lift these questions and ensure, as Per said, that we have diversity and also a strong sense of belonging in the WASP community. And I think we have with us today an excellent panel to discuss exactly these issues. So I'm not going to take much time speaking myself, but I would like to have each of our panelists present who they are. And before that, just simply say that the intention for this sort of 2 hours together is to really have as interactive a session as possible. So please come in with your questions, and we will give space for the questions to be asked by Pat during our discussions this afternoon. So let me start with our first panelist, and I will allow her the chance to present who she is, but also give us a little bit of insight about what has mattered most for really coming into, let's say, the Swedish setting. Aisha.
Hi. So I'm Aisha Jaina. I am a third-year PhD student working with human-robot interaction, specifically modeling humans' nonverbal cues to make robots more intelligent. So I work at the computer science department at the Lund University in Sweden. And a bit about my background. So I did my undergraduate in mechanical engineering in India, and then I worked in the software industry for like about 3 years. And then I did my master's in the UK in robotics, and then I'm doing my PhD here in Sweden. Then coming to Amy's question, what was my motivation moving to Sweden? Like for a PhD, I think a major thing is like the topic of the research. So when I applied for the position, that the topic was kind of defined, but then through the interview process, or the discussions that I had during the recruitment, I felt quite comfortable with the people who were interviewing me. So they were mostly the supervisors. And yes, and then I knew that, okay, Sweden also has this large international cohort of researchers and PhDs also at the same time, even at the university, which makes it diverse, but also very comfortable, like an environment to work in. So that was something really important to me. And also it's they have a good gender balance. I think that was also something that I looked at. So yeah, and it's a beautiful city, at least Lund, and all like the Swedish city. So it's pretty green, and it was really nice to to the PhD here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to you again, Aisha, with some follow-up questions. But let's take our next panelist. Ekta, would you like to give us a presentation of who you are and factors for successful relocation to Sweden?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Ekta. Ekta means, I think, real in Swedish, but it's an Indian name. In Hindi, it means unity. I work as an assistant professor in machine learning and a Bayer researcher at Uppsala University. And I'm also a new member of the WASP Diversity and Inclusion Group. My research focus is on multimodal deep learning and text recognition, really old handwriting. I like to recognize the text. I'm originally from India, from Delhi. I was born in Delhi, and I moved to Sweden more than 8 years ago to do my postdoctoral work at Uppsala University. And honestly, I liked it so much here that I decided to stay. And thinking about the key factors, like for my successful relocation to Sweden, I would say that firstly, there are a lot of opportunities available. For example, PhD and postdoc positions, tenure track positions. I think that's really important. The research ecosystem, I think, that we have here is quite vast. Like, we have good funding opportunities and facilities available for research. That's quite attractive for academics. And I also truly believe that there is this sense of belongingness, like you matter, your work matters, your family matters. And also Sweden has taught me that it's okay to take a pause sometimes to stop and reflect. So not much race about, publishing. Your well-being is important. Yeah. And also the concept of Allemansrätten, I think that's really nice and unique. And for me, like when I first heard about it, so you can be out in the nature, pick berries, for instance. And lastly, I also believe that the Swedish culture, like both academic and traditions, they make you feel really nice here. Like, it's really nice. Of course, fika and kanelbulle. So yeah, one must really come to Sweden. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, thank you. So let's go over to Joachim. Let us hear your background. Joachim, are you with us? There you are. Now we don't hear you for some reason.
I have to
Now we do.
activate the microphone. Now I've learned something. I thought you would do it for me. All right. My name is Joachim Schnad. I'm the science director of the Max IV laboratory at Lund University, a national facility. I'm also professor in physics at the Department of Physics here in Lund. It always gets like a bit of a bio when you talk about where you come from. So this is what this is going to be as well, in a way. So I came to Sweden a long time ago. I've been here actually for 29 years minus 2.5 years where I was somewhere else. I came to Sweden in 1996 as an undergraduate student, actually. So I did an exchange here in Uppsala. And then, things come as they come. So I stayed on for a PhD in Uppsala, which I finished there. And then I relocated to Denmark. So I have done 2 relocation processes, or 3 if you so wish. So it was 2.5 years in Denmark, in Aarhus, as a postdoc. And then in 2005, I came to Lund as an assistant professor, forskarassistent at that time. And again, as things happen, they happen. Then in 2010, I became a professor in physics here at the Department of Physics. And I've been the first interim science director and now science director of Max IV since 1.5 years ago. So that's the bio. One thing that is important for everybody is not only the background as a foreigner, it's also the background in which you've grown up in, and when it comes to an academic career. So I thought I'd say a couple of words on that one also, because I have a fairly easy background in that sense. My parents are academics. They didn't do a PhD, they didn't do academic careers afterwards, but they studied at university. So I knew what I was getting into. My sister and me were the first then in the family to do PhDs. So that was the next step. But of course, that also is important. And we won't be touching upon like this double difficulty if you're not from academic background and if you're a foreigner coming to Sweden, because that makes things more difficult, actually. Right, relocating to Sweden, what were key ingredients? I think we've heard a couple of. I've never said where I'm from, right? I'm from Germany. Sorry, I'm originally from Germany. I'm from the city of Cologne or Köln. That's where I grew up. And now, as I said, I moved to Sweden at some point. Now, key factors. Well, I mean, we've heard already something about that one. And one of the things is that although Sweden perhaps is, on a personal level, not the most open society, it's a bit hard to get into contact with the Swedes. We all know that. But it is a quite open society, actually. So there are opportunities to foreigners that you probably don't see in many other countries at that level that we have in Sweden. Whether this is going to change might be, we don't know, but we surely see that here today. Then there are a couple of other things that I think have been very important. When you come to another country where you don't have any network, you're on your own. This is a tough experience, so you have to build up a network. It is good if you become active. If you become active at work, I think that's what I try to do. If you become active out of work, because life is not only work, so finding a hobby that you can do together with others. So not only doing sports on yourself, but doing something else. I think that was at least for me a very important factor. So since I've been coming to Sweden, I've been singing in a choir, or also too, at some point. And that gives you some kind of activity, and it gives you other people to talk to. Of course, it helps very much if your personal relationships also are from inside the country. My partner is Swedish, so we came to know in Sweden. That of course makes it easier and to get more into the country. Now, this might also be something that we touch upon. I mean, I've changed for sure during the almost 30 years that I've been here. My partner also has changed. She has become less Swedish, that we talk about sometimes. So it's quite interesting. I think the one important factor is for foreigners coming to Sweden is, although everything works perfectly in English, learning Swedish is a key factor. It is a key that opens the society for you in quite a different way than if you don't learn Swedish. I think I can stay here.
Right. And some of the things you mentioned we're actually going to revisit again. And let's go over to Sandra Viro.
Yeah, thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Di Rocco. I'm currently the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, the School of Engineering Sciences at KTH. I'm also a professor in mathematics in algebraic geometry at KTH, where I moved to in, I think, about permanently 2003. So it's been a long time here. As you can guess from my name, actually not from my name, but probably from my last name, I come from Italy. So originally, I'm Italian. I grew up in a small town in central Italy, not from an academic family at all. Both my parents were not actually university graduates. I was the first in the family. And before coming to Sweden, I had a little tour around. I left Italy when I was 22, right after my university studies, and I moved to the US for my PhD. Then after that, I came back. I actually had my first postdoc in Sweden at a mathematics institute called Mittag-Leffler Institute in Stockholm, where I first got in touch with the Swedish culture, Swedish science center in Stockholm. I had no idea. I had never been in Sweden before. I did not even know of any Swedish university at that time. I knew of this institute. So everything was new for me. I stayed here for 1 year, and that was enough. I didn't stay then. I had other plans, so I moved first to Germany and then to US, where I was for 2 years, 3 years totally, as a junior faculty, and then I moved back to Sweden in 2003 as a faculty member at KTH, together with my husband. That was one of the factors that actually brought me to Sweden. But I don't want to say that was the factor, because that without the other factors would not have worked for me. So I mentioned this first year in Sweden, and that was an eye opener for me, because actually, regardless of the scientific value that I actually was experience, I have been experiencing the whole year, that was very, very dense. It was a postdoc at this research institute, so it was very international, lots of big names coming in. So it was a very interesting experience from that point of view. But what really was important for me was this sense of belonging that I felt from the very beginning I arrived in Sweden. And this didn't happen in Germany, did not happen in the US when I was there as a PhD, and even when I then came back to the US as a faculty, and then actually decided to come back to Sweden. And this kind of arguments you do every day: should I stay here, should I go, what is good here, what is good there? And this sense of belonging for me was the key. And this is not something, I don't know, usually if you hear about inclusion, I say you always hear about the fact that first there is the sense of inclusion, that you feel part of something, and then if you have the sense of belonging, where you really feel that you can work in this environment, you can actually influence this environment. This is a feeling I had from the very first day when I was in Sweden. And then I carried this out my all time here, because when I moved here, of course, I mean, it's like buying a new apartment. Everything, there is this excitement at the beginning. Everything is new. You have a job and you buy a house, and but then along the way, of course, there are angles that you didn't look at, things who did not work, you were expecting. Also, there are things to be fixed along the way. And this happens to everyone. We will talk about this certainly later. But this sense of belonging actually helped me actually navigating these periods with a very encouraging, open-minded, with the goal of building something, for me, for my career, my family, and everything. So I'm staying there, but I just wanted to mention.
Excellent.
This.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra. And our final panelist is Sylvia. Please, Sylvia, tell us about who you are, your background.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here. My name is Sylvia Schwagsberger. I'm a professor of research policy at Lund University and currently the president of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. And like Joachim and Sandra, it's been a long time since I've been in Sweden. I came when I was in the process of finishing my PhD. And the reason I came, is because I met a Swede. So I would say coming to Sweden was sort of collateral damage or collateral benefit of meeting a Swede. And I think both apply. I would say a lot of things have been said that I would very much agree with, but I was born and raised in Germany, and born in Münster, raised in Bavaria, but also with a Chinese American mother. So I grew up in a multicultural family to begin with, and I think that in a way helps navigate different societies. I studied in the US and in Italy, and then finally did my PhD in the UK. And I would say that Sweden is, I think has been mentioned before, it's a very easy society to arrive in. And there are very many well thought of processes and procedures for how to handle people who are arriving in Sweden. But it's not an easy society to penetrate. And I say that as somebody who has been married to a Swede for 30 years soon. But it's a long journey. And I think as somebody who's lived in other cultures, I think the challenge with Sweden, I would say, is that, you know, when you arrive, it is both a very open and a very closed society. So it's very easy to navigate, but it takes a while to understand where the cultural barriers are. They're not as visible as they might be in other countries. But I said collateral benefit or collateral damage because after 30 years in Sweden, where I've built up my networks and I've really understood Sweden, and as Joachim said, I think I've changed a lot. You know, I went from being considered an extrovert to when I did a personality test now, I was considered an introvert. So I can tell that Sweden has changed me quite a bit. So that would be, and just about my career, which is perhaps a little bit different because when I finished my PhD, I was in the last year of my PhD when I moved to Sweden. And then I decided to leave academia for a while. So I spent 20 years in policymaking and then returned full-time to academia. I published about one paper every 18 months while I was outside of academia, which is quite common in other countries, but not in Sweden. So that's another thing which you might want to think about, that I think the distances between academia and policymaking, for example, I would argue are a little bit bigger, especially in certain disciplines. So, you know, that's something also to navigate. Anyway, just my one thing, maybe we'll come back to that, but there's a lot of emphasis on formal qualifications, on trust, on networks, which sounds perhaps contradictory, but it's not. But one of the things I've learned is that when you find people that believe in you, go with those people.
Very nicely said. So I have a question that I would like to ask Sandra, Joachim, and Sylvia, and then I have another question that I would like to ask in particular Ekta and Aisha. But let me start with, let's say, the more seniors in the panel. And my question is, coming from abroad, is there a glass ceiling for those who are coming from abroad into Sweden that is not, let's say, well articulated or not very clear that you have experienced throughout your time? And I'll actually give the floor first to you, Sylvia, if you can comment on this.
So just to liven up the conversation, I would say I do think there is a glass ceiling, and in a way it's not really visible. Do you see what I mean? And I also don't think it is ill-intentioned. So that's what I would like to say. I think it's more that it takes a while to understand how to navigate Swedish society and Swedish professional context, and you will not be told. You know, as somebody, I'm generalizing now, but I've lived in other cultures where people tell you very clearly when they think you're not behaving the way you're supposed to do. This is not something that's likely to happen in Sweden, you know. But so it took me about 10 years to understand when people said to me, "That sounds interesting." That could mean you couldn't be more wrong, but I'm just not going to, you know, I don't want to embarrass you. So I think it takes a little bit of time to understand that. But I would also say, so that's why I would say initially I think there's a glass ceiling also because this in my mind is a very trust-based society and it takes time to earn trust. But once you have earned that trust and once you have proven yourself, then this sort of glass ceiling can turn into almost the opposite. Then it is very easy to navigate the society and to actually interact with many different people at many different levels. So that will be my answer, but I'm happy to be contradicted.
Yeah, but if I could give the word over to Joachim, because you mentioned as well the importance of language. So going back to this glass ceiling, I mean, will learning the language solve it, or is there a glass ceiling and other things that one needs to be mindful of, as Sylvia was mentioning?
Well, let me start by saying that I agree there is a glass ceiling. I mean, it is enough to look at, if you look at the leading people in different places, whether this is at university and companies, even in politics, where it's actually a bit softer, you will find essentially only Swedish names. In what the one area where there is a distinction today that is actually politics. If you look at the top politicians, there are actually quite a few who have a foreign background. But of course, one also needs to realize these are not first generation immigrants. They're typically second generation or third or whatever. But they are definitely there. So there is an openness. Let me just say that one. But there is a glass ceiling. I do think so. Will the language help? Yes, it's an absolute necessity in the end. I mean, like, if you want to get there, if you feel that you need to do that, well, this is a Swedish-speaking level. Of course, they all speak English. We will happily be speaking English to you, but things are actually being discussed in Swedish. That is entirely clear. And I don't even think it's wrong, because in the end, Sweden is a country on its own. We're not the UK or the US or whatever. Sweden is Sweden. So of course, we also have to adapt to that one. There's another aspect to it, and so it was a bit into that one, and that is, I mean, Sweden seems to be a hierarchy-free almost country, but that's not true, actually. It's just not very visible. There are a lot of hierarchies. As a foreigner, it's hard to identify them. It is hard to navigate in them, but the Swedes will see them. Those who have grown up in this country here, they know what the hierarchy is, where foreigners might say, well, I don't see actually any difference here, but they are. And you have to learn to navigate in that.
Excellent. And Sandra, you as well as others on the panel, you have kind of climbed up, let's say, the academic career and the academic ladder within KTH. From an academic context, is there a glass ceiling? And can you reflect a little bit about how that looks? Like, for example, given the number of academics who come from abroad, do we have that representation in high-level management at the universities? And if not, why?
Yeah, this is actually a very good point, and Joachim already mentioned this. This is certainly a glass ceiling. Our academic structure is quite apparently open, but even language-wise, we all always say, but English is the second language in Sweden. There is no problem in functioning and working in English. But when it comes to career and when it comes to getting to certain leadership at some levels, that their language, I mean, knowing the language and being able to use the language is important. And this is something that actually you discovered at some point. It's not written, it's not something that people tell you. I completely agree that even in academia, this fact that I mean, this I would say consensus culture is something that you have to learn to actually navigate. How to interact with people, how to read the feedback. Everyone needs feedback. If you want to grow, you need to have actually good and constructive feedback. In Sweden, this is a problem. But it's a problem until you treat it as a problem. So my advice would be clear with your colleagues and with the people you interact. Be clear and spell it out. I would like to have even and constructive negative feedback. It's something that I need in order to grow. If you say it clearly, then it's like you have to give permission to your peers actually to do that. But once you do that clearly, then in my experience, actually, it's not 100%. I mean, there is something in the culture but you can actually stimulate some growth. And for this, actually, my advice is actually networking. Build up your network from the very first day you arrive in this country. This will help you actually understand the culture and even growing through the various levels. I have to say that in my experience, what helped me a little bit at the beginning was the fact that I think I was very naive. in the sense that and this is actually also my advice, be naive. Don't expect things to happen because I deserve it or because I'm good enough and therefore in the next stage I should expect this to happen. I never did it, and I always try to be vocal about actually my expectations and the way that I thought the work environment should work and so forth. And this I really believe helped me, because that was my diversity input in a consensus culture where everyone was a little bit afraid of saying aloud what should be done. My naive way of doing this actually helped me I think actually not only helped me in raising my voice and being visible, but helped in my career. So actually moving into Sweden can seem easy, as actually Sylvia said at the beginning. There are rules, so you can buy your house in English. You don't. Everything is very regulated. You are not so afraid of being of doing things wrongly. I mean, everything is very spelled out compared to Italy. In my way, in my opinion, everything was really, really easy. But then the next level, it's not as easy, because in the next level you have to sort of penetrate the culture in a way that you know the code, but you don't actually lose your differences, and that step can require some work actually.
Very well said. Very nice. I'd like to ask Ekta and Aisha a slightly different question, because both of you mentioned something, which is the importance of climate. You mentioned the importance of the research climate as well as the work-life balance, and also in general, you both offered a lot of praise to the sort of natural environment that Sweden has to offer. And what I'd like to ask is, well, basically my question is, what is it that will keep you here? Or asked differently, what should not happen so that you would leave? Ekta, have you reflected about this aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very good question, and something I often ask myself as well. But I think there is a glass ceiling, like what was discussed earlier, that you get to know once you are here. You don't know when you are coming here. You think that English is okay, it's used everywhere. But then it strikes you that if you would like to climb further the academic ladder, then you have to learn the language. So that is something which I feel is really important. And if I am not able to speak good Swedish, I think I might hit a wall at some point in my academic career, when I feel that maybe I should, focus more on either language learning, or maybe something is wrong, can I be here or not? But also there is another aspect, which is about your family. So I have a 6-year-old who is born here. We are raising him in Sweden, and he's very Swedish. I mean, he has never been to India, for instance. We have never been to India in the past, ever since he was born. So he's very Swedish. So I think that's also one of the factors that we feel that, okay, your family is happy here. How can you grow as an academic in Sweden? And I think language is one thing which I feel that is a kind of a barrier. It is an unsaid truth that you find out much later. And if you know it sooner, I'm pretty sure everybody would, focus on learning Swedish along with their research and teaching. Absolutely. But yeah, it strikes a bit later.
Can I ask you, perhaps your son is too young, but is he getting schooling in his mother tongue? Does he get any option?
Yes.
And for me, I mean, I grew up in Canada. I think this is something that is so unique, that children who grow up in a household speaking a different language actually get some ability to learn that language as well in school.
Yeah, absolutely. He just started school last month, actually. And he's taking himspråk lessons in Hindi. And it's very different in the sense that he's the only one taking Hindi lessons. So you can say that not many people who speak in Hindi live in the neighborhood. But he's really happy. And I think we are happy that there is this opportunity available to actually learn about your Hemsproch since when you are 6. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How about you, Aisha? You know, from WASP perspective, we really want to keep our WASP students staying in Sweden and having fantastic careers in Sweden. So what can we do to make sure that you have a long career in Sweden if you would want?
That's a very good question. So, I know like over the past years, WASP has at least tried to push the barrier to keep its PhDs as postdocs and as international researchers and have this relocation program at a point so that people who are doing research outside can also come back if you are from WASP. However, I still feel there needs to be a bit more, I wouldn't say effort, but more like the connection to industry because not everyone would want to stay in academia and would probably want to go to industry at a point. So maybe I would say more opportunities or at least to know where this opportunities lies. Because for me, I guess one of the biggest challenges I have had was like the visas. They take so long to get processed. And then it becomes very tricky because you probably may not be able to attend conferences at the time or may not be able to like do any other things at the possible like time. So yes, and I know like this process used to be a bit easier a few years back, but now it's just been longer and longer. But having like a clear, I would say like connection to industry and seeing where this opportunities lies and how I can contribute more. I think that barrier, if like that's broken and like we have more information about, oh, these things are happening here, these things are happening there, which I know WASP does a lot of efforts in because you have the industry days, academic days, and yes, but you know, the more the better. So it's more like that because we are a lot of PhD students, but then we also know like with the AI coming in, the job opportunities and how the markets like it's difficult to navigate at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, and Sylvia, you mentioned this as being something that you noticed in Sweden that if I understood correctly, that there's a little bit of a bigger gap between academia and industry. So what more
Mm.
can be done, particularly Sylvia, given the role that you have today as president of RIVA?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's, and again, I want to say, you know, it's been a long time since I got my PhD, so I'm hoping what I'm saying now is outdated. But I do think that my impression has been also from my recent years at my department that PhDs, of course, depending on the discipline, but in a lot of disciplines, PhDs in Sweden are still a little bit more trained to stay in academia. That's why they're being educated. In the countries that I've studied and worked, you know, in the UK and Germany, I shouldn't, but also in Germany from my experience and the US, it's sort of like a PhD is in a way, and I don't mean to put it down, but it's a little bit just sort of an indication that you can work independently and think critically. Do you understand? And it's like an entry for any kind of job that values that. Whereas I experienced both so I experienced from academia that you're trained very much to be within that, to stay in academia. And I experienced from industry when I came to Sweden that this is what I mean. I think there's a lot of focus on formal qualifications. So if you look at Swedish industry, I think there's still a strong tendency to mainly hire, for example, engineers and people who have an economics degree, whereas in other countries you can have a philosophy degree, or do you see what I mean? So these things are quite compartmentalized, and I think that's something you have to understand. And I was just at KTH last week, and a foreign-born researcher said, I would love to get more involved in policy making, but I don't know how. And that is also not easy, again, for slightly different reasons. So I think there's a lot there that could be done. And I think it's really interesting you raised that, Aisha, because that is a factor that might affect Sweden's attractiveness.
So I'm soon going to open the floor for Pat to reflect on what the audience is saying. Before I do that, maybe let me just round off, let's say, this first session by saying the statistics in WASP that could be interesting to know is that we've now reached our 200th graduate from the program. We see so far of those who are now alumni that 75% stay in Sweden and 60% go to industry. Per, tell us what is happening on the chat.
Yes, there is some activity, and I ensure you that we see your messages. So even if you don't see each other's questions, we see them and we bring them up to the discussion. So keep asking your questions. I have two questions following up what we talk about. One is that you are positive. You have positive experience. You have stayed. You are here, but the dark side of things. What is really the problems? You have touched upon it. The second question is about the glass ceiling. Would you really say you have to fight it, or is it more of a strategic approach that you make your choices, or is it? Would you describe it as kind of fight or battle?
Yes, good. The floor is open. Any one of those questions. What do our panelists say? Please jump in.
All right, I can jump in then.
Okay, no, Joachim, go ahead. Yes.
If that's all right. I mean, that was a very interesting question, whether it's a fight. Yes, it is a fight. I would say it's a subtle fight. I mean, it's not as if you're fighting all the time. But I mean, I think we should be honest to ourselves. As a foreigner, you always have to overachieve. You have to do even better. I mean, being a foreigner, that's not the only reason. I mean, being a woman, let's be honest again, you have to overachieve to get to the same kind of positions. So of course you always have to work hard to move forward, definitely. And then of course, well, the network is going to help and finding the right strategies, which I mean, like, people are very different. I myself, I mean, in terms of my career, I haven't been very strategic. I have to say, it has been, or if you call it being the right person at the right place at the right time, if that's a strategy. But it has worked out obviously in some way. So I mean, but it has been more for me about trying to do my best really all the time.
Yeah, good. Sandra, and by the way, for the panelists, if you wonder how I know who to call, it's when you unmute your mics, then I know you want to say something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
So go ahead,
about to
Sandra.
say something, in fact, and Joachim, that's a very good actually way of spotting who wants to speak. Yes, I also think these are very interesting questions. First, about the glass ceiling, did we break it? Yes and no, I would say. I mean, yes, in a sense that we did manage to get to a certain level. So in a way, we understood the path forward. But I don't see that in my position, I can say that I feel actually now satisfied that how things are or how things have been going. At KTH, for example, in the management of the university, and I'm talking about, of course, president, the vice presidents, and the deans, I am the only foreigner. And KTH has more than 50% of its faculty being from outside Sweden. So when it comes to, actually, I think Joachim said it. When it comes to actually representation, not only gender is something we should look at, but also really representing the broadness in the faculty when it comes to culture. And this is very strange, and this is a really thick glass ceiling that I see hard to break in a reasonable time because we never talk about it. I mean, when we talk about inclusion and when we talk about diversity, we end up mainly, or in my experience, we always end up talking about gender. And other aspects like really diversity as an international diversity and actually representation. Because of course, if my colleagues, my many international colleagues see that at the very top, there is no one looking like them, I mean, what is the incentive to then try to fight this glass ceiling? That's one thing. And this is not actually not good news, in fact. Then this fight of the glass ceiling that you mentioned, Per, it is a fight, but I hope that it doesn't feel like a war, because everything that feels like a war, maybe it's not worth it doing. I mean, it's a fight, is an everyday fight, but it has to be something that you really want to put your energy to. You really have to believe that things that you can actually you can make a difference. And as Per says, this is choices every day, and getting involved and putting yourself out in the fight. Be really in the front line. Don't try to stay too much backwards, because then that will not help.
Sylvia, would you like to comment? And maybe also, can I just add, I'm going to pull one of the questions that I saw that's popped up, because we're talking a lot about that glass ceiling, but also sometimes weaving in the importance of language. And what I would like to maybe you to also comment on, is there something sinister going on? Meaning that it's sometimes the excuse of language used as a way to maybe exclude. Sylvia.
That's a really interesting question. I I would start off by saying I totally agree with Sandra that I find that very frustrating that diversity is very often reduced to gender. I think that's a real issue that we have to that we should address in Sweden. I also think, I think it was Joachim or Sandra said, I think the big challenge in Sweden is sort of, I mean, maybe that's in other cultures, but this is the one I've been trying to penetrate more persistently, the society, is that, you know, how do you make sure that you can carve out a place for yourself in this society without having to become a completely different person, without staying true to who you are? You know, that is, I think, something that you have to think about. I had a really interesting conversation with a Swede the other day, and he said, have you noticed, because he's worked a lot abroad, and he said, you know, one of the problems he thinks is that Swedish people tend to be, in our mind, I think for people who come to Sweden, very strangely non-curious about you. And I think it has to do with the fact that it's the sense of nobody should think that there's something special, you know, which is this whole sense of equality, but also, and that can really undermine you, you know, at a time, especially as a researcher, when you have to believe that you're a little bit special because you're doing something really hard. Society is sort of telling you, we're not really interested in where you're from. You're just here right now. You know, there's very little sort of, oh, what did you do before? How interesting? What's your culture like? You know, and I think that can really mess with your head, and it's hard to maintain sort of a confidence sometimes in you know, you do this, the confidence that I think a lot of researchers need to be able to carry on with work that you know, you're penetrating a subject very deeply. So I think these things are challenging. I agree with Sandra, it shouldn't become a fight. I like the point you said, Sandra, about being naive. I think that's really good. I always try to be curious, you know, I just try to view it as a journey. How interesting that nobody's asking me, you know, what I did before I came here, or how interesting that blah, blah, you know, that there seems to be this unwritten code that I'm clearly not a part of. I would say I don't think it's sinister. I think it's just that Swedish people might not always understand that you think you can get by with English, and then when you realize you can't, you feel sort of tricked. Do you see what I mean? So that I think it's more that, and I don't think it's sinister, but it is hard. I don't think, I agree with Sandra. I don't know if you ever fully break the glass ceiling, but I would also say once, I mean, when we've been doing this for a long time, and I am now quite positively surprised. You go from a glass ceiling to the sky's the limit when you stick with it.
Very nice. Aisha, your comment.
Yes, I probably have a bit different opinion about it, maybe because I'm more like with students, and that the opportunities, like at least when I came to Sweden and all, it was pretty like a open plate for me. Like you could do so many things, you could network so much. I think because I came with one research program which was elite, and then I got affiliated to WASP at a point. So it gives me a broad opportunity to actually network with people, and I realized that pretty early on, like networking is very important. And I agreed to some point, like, yes, it can be tricky to navigate, like to talk to people who are from here initially, but then if they get to know you well, then you're really good friends, like, or you, like the bond can be really stronger. So I think this comes from like a point of view from like a younger generation where people are trying to like be a bit more inclusive to your thoughts, your ideas, or how you talk to them, like over lunches or over fikas, and trying to listening to your point of view, or like thinking like, okay, they can also be heard. So yeah, I have a bit different opinion there, but I think it's just because like how generations over generations keep on changing, and people try to be more inclusive over a period of time. So yeah.
Yes, and let's see, we have you, Joachim. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I would like to come back to the language question because I think actually it was put in the wrong way. It is made too easy for foreigners in Sweden to just talk English. That's my opinion. It's my honest opinion. And that leads them to, as Sylvia said, this idea of that you could go anywhere with just English. But we are, as I said before, we are Sweden. And we have, as foreigners, we have a duty to get into the country and learn the language. So yeah, it is a both take and give. I mean, we have to learn the language, and we should not expect that we can go on wherever without Swedish. Then the gift from the Swedes is, well, they have to learn, and that can also be a challenge. They have to learn to accept that the people perhaps do not speak perfect Swedish or write perfect Swedish. But like then they get a bit more like in the US that, well, okay, that person has an accent, but I understand that person anyway. So yeah, I think we have a duty here as well. But of course, it's also a duty for the Swedish society. And I haven't experienced any problem with that one. I mean, like people do accept you even if you don't talk perfect Swedish.
Sandra.
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing. I want to lower my hand. So, about the language, I think this is a very important point. And about your question, Amy, has this been used? Certainly has been used, I think. But in my experience, is actually more the contrary. I would have much liked to appoint this person to a certain role if this person had some knowledge or better knowledge of the language. I'm very often in this position. And this is it's not something we should, as actually Joachim says, we should not complain too much about it, because we work, at least, I mean, we are not talking about WASP, which is a private entity and one can do whatever. But if you work at a state university, which is, you know, the majority, the big majority of universities in Sweden, then your document are in Swedish, and there is no way you can have an official document translated officially to a different language. This will not happen, and so we shouldn't be surprised that in order to have a leadership position, a person has to know the language to a certain point. But this should be made clear, and that's what is missing. Exactly as you say, Joachim. Many people maybe have the impression that since I always speak English, we have departments that function in English. They have their meetings in English. You speak to your PhD students in English. You speak to your colleagues in English. You speak 100% in English. Then you might have this impression that that's the way it is, and I can just continue this. We should be clear with our colleagues, and again, this is back to feedbacks. I mean, and also leadership. I mean, whoever is in a leadership position to be able to actually give advices to the junior faculty in our programs and universities should say that investing in learning the language, even though Swedish is can be perceived as a very small language, only 10 people speaking this language, but in Sweden is important. I totally agree with Joachim, in fact.
Good. Pat, let me pass the word back to you because I imagine there are questions that have come into the chat. Unmute, Pat.
I think I clicked. Okay, thank you. Yes, there are questions coming in, and there is comments back on this language, but I think there is also a question of this about this trust-based context or culture that you mentioned before. So we tend to talk about Swedish culture as trust-based, but here is an observer that says it's less so now than before. I don't know if that's based on studies or not. Is this something that is under change, what you see, or is it still an essential factor, this trust-based culture?
Let's see, who would like to comment on that question? Sort of, if I understand, Pat, you're also sort of pointing to like the evolution of how things have changed over time. Sylvia, please
Right.
go ahead.
I mean, briefly, I think I just accessed some of the comments, and I think this was also linked to whether there's a difference between academia and industry, right? And I would say like this. I actually wrote a report about this, and I think Swedish academia has changed a lot since I wrote this report in 2013. But one of the things I noted, and I think WASP, by the way, is doing an excellent job in trying to change that, but is that, there has been a tendency in Swedish academia to sort of recruit a lot internally. And then, depending on the funding streams, like there's a strong sort of loyalty or wish to be able to keep the people that you've sort of trained, and I think that what is changing. So I would say like this: I think trust is still very important. I do think there is a difference between industry and academia in the sense that I think in academia is a little bit more sheltered. Like I think industry really has to find, when they're looking for top talent. I'll give you an example. Like I know that there are a lot of Swedes of foreign origin who are wouldn't mind coming back to Sweden now, given what's happening in the US. But they say that it's not easy for them. They don't see a lot of interest from the departments. It's actually much easier for them to get hired by a company. Like companies are contacting them and saying, we would like your competence. So I do think there is something changing, and that is something that might be important to keep in mind, that there's perhaps even more unwritten rules or codes or tendencies to value homegrown qualifications a little bit more in academia than perhaps outside of academia. But I'm happy to be contradicted.
Pat, what do you say? We start looking at another question. Or is there anyone who wants to comment with regards to what Sylvia mentioned?
It's difficult I don't know, for me it's difficult because I don't work I work in academia, and I've been only working in academia. So this comparison, it's a bit difficult. It is true that though that this possibility of actually recruiting people from especially US recently, maybe I would have expected a much more overwhelmingly big interest. The fact that it's not the case, even though there is some very quite visible interest, there have been already a few people recruited. But I think the problem is back to our financial system. and at which level one has to take a responsibility for a new hiring. This complicates things. This doesn't really allow for a spontaneous, big, strategic hiring. If not, this comes from the very top, and this is difficult in Sweden without a big consensus. I mean, I don't foresee a president of a university coming and decided on its own, because the moment you start investigating consensus, you have a lot of groups inspired for the same thing, and this is one of the difficulties that I noticed in Sweden, that it's a little bit more difficult to think strategically because of this consensus culture.
Very good point. Thank you. Per.
Yeah, we have one follow-up question on the language, specifically to Joachim maybe, but to all of you. Related to this, as you have observed, we welcome people. Yes, you can do well on English, but gradually they realize that you need to know and talk Swedish. So how should we do it? How could we make this an opportunity, and what are the carrots and what are the sticks?
Well, since it was kind of directed to me, I'll probably start.
Please start.
I mean, let me first point out that we actually do things in the sense that when we do an announcement, there might be different departments. I should be clear about that one. But all the announcements for lectureships, senior assistant, university lectureships, professors that we've made when I was head of Department of Physics, that we have done, they stated explicitly that you are supposed to learn Swedish within a time period of a couple of years, to a degree so that you actually can work in a Swedish environment at the university. So it's not as if it's completely hidden. What is the big challenge in comparison to other countries is, of course, that there is a society that is very willing to talk English all the time, because all the Swedes and we all recognize ourselves in that one. Think they are brilliant in English to agree, and they think they're more brilliant in English than they actually are. So that of course makes it difficult. In addition, there is this communication challenge that, well, I mean, Swedes are not very outspoken, and the Swedish society is not always very outspoken about what to do things. So what to do about that? What kind of carrots could we have? I mean, for the first, and I think that then comes back to actually heads of departments, that comes back to deans, that comes back to managers. Well, we should be clear about, and that has been said, we should be clear about that we have an expectation on that people should learn Swedish, and we should give the opportunity. It takes time to learn a language. This is entirely clear. And if you have to do that at the same time as you try to get scientific achievements, it is a burden. That's also clear about that one. So if we get a recognition to that this is actually work, that you can do it during work time, and that we will take it into account when we go to the next step, well, then of course we've won a lot. We need to take it into our evaluation, for example, for promotion. If you have learned Swedish as a senior assistant university lecturer and want to be promoted, well, that should be recognized, I think. So as universities, of course, we can do stuff about that. We can do things. We can, and we should organize the languages course and pay them and make sure that we have good language courses. As organizations, we can do very much, but it is very hard to change this society from this kind of mentality that it's always better to speak English.
Yes, yes, and many universities now have it sort of built into their processes for promotion. I would like to ask a bit about how attractive is Sweden for international talent, do you think? Because we've heard many of your sort of backgrounds and stories, and what I'm wondering, and I actually see also a question that comes up in the chat about this, is are we lucky in that we find people who have partners who are Swedish or are going there because their partners are Swedish or coming to Sweden because their partners are Swedish? Or is Sweden actually a magnet for international top talent? Your reflections. Aisha.
Yes, I can add something here. One of the reasons, so when I applied for the PhD, which was adverted, it was actually in a very open and international platform. So I could actually see it and know, okay, this position was advertised. But then when I looked at as to how PhDs are in Sweden, so it's more like employees as compared to students, which is the case of a lot of countries, which was, I think, one of the things which was attractive to me, because then I was like, okay, I have like paid vacations. There are also like parental leave. There's also like kind of social security. So that is, if I compare in terms of a PhD to other countries, there's like stipends and there's like no proper balance in terms of work and life. Like, what do I do out of my work? Because like after coming here also, like what I'm responsible for, like I'm pretty much responsible for my work. No one, I can manage my own time schedules. I do not need to like sit here maybe for like 10 hours or 12 hours a day doing my work. I mean, it's quite uh, I think quite flexible for me in that case. So yeah, so I mean, that's what like I think, like in terms of like what attracted me like to Sweden. It's also, I saw like there were a lot of collaborations which were happening with universities. I think that was also very important to me, because in that case, okay, I could like probably go to visit different countries if I want to do research somewhere else while I'm doing my PhD, because I am able to collaborate with different people at the same time, or even partner like with different labs who are working in similar things. So those things like were very essential to me while I was trying to see, okay, what in which country like the PhDs matter and what actually works better for me in that case. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering, Sandra, what you think, because whether or not people like deliberately seek out Sweden. I can just say my own personal experience. It was completely coincidental that I ended up here because growing up in North America, it's kind of a rite of passage to go backpack around Europe. I wanted to do an exchange somewhere. My heart was set on Spain, but all the places were taken, and alphabetically after Spain came Sweden. So I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this, but I did not deliberately seek out Sweden, but I'm glad I ended up here. What about you, Sandra? What do you think? Does Sweden attract top talent?
So I I really think that it does. And I would also say that this has developed enormously during the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, I came to Sweden 20 years ago, and as I said at the beginning, I didn't even know of KTH at that time. Right now, I see and I witness every day our recruitments. KTH and Sweden is very much on the map. So people do choose actually Sweden because of the work conditions and the scientific value. We have a lot of international applicants, very strong ones, people who choose us over other strong names. So I'm really very positive about how things are going. Then I have to say that when it comes to staying in Sweden, because the fact that we employ people this fact does not mean that these people will stay in Sweden, and this happens. I mean, people move, and I noticed that being able to convince people of high caliber, this big talents to stay is very much linked to the Swedish work life, as Aisha was saying, the family opportunities, and this is something that you have to experience. So I noticed that if we employ someone who had been already in Sweden as a postdoc or come to Sweden as a very junior faculty with a family, starting a family here, experiencing all the benefits of living in Sweden, these are the colleagues who typically stay in Sweden.
Let's see. Pat, what do you say? And then more questions that we should pick up from the chat. And you need to unmute.
Yes, there are questions following up on the same, more on the comparison to other countries, so US or England, and both related to the language question, but also about the funding situation. So it was mentioned before here. You concluded recently that social life-wise, there are many benefits, but when it comes to funding for your research, even quite top talented people have to work hard on writing their project applications. Is that anything you would see be barriers to international recruitment?
Joachim, what do you say?
It definitely is a barrier at the higher levels. It is. We've just heard that from Aisha, for example. It is very attractive to come here at the earlier stages of career. Then we have really great offers to recruit a professor at the highest international level. I mean, the language is not a problem because we don't even get them here. Because we can't make the offers that we will need to do. So the strategies that we have chosen typically as universities is to try to get the brightest young people and make sure that they stay to the degree that this is possible. Then of course we need to realize that people will always be mobile and you might get a better offer from somewhere else, but that also might be beneficial for us. Well, this being said, it is not as if we shouldn't think about what we can do to increase our attractiveness at higher levels as well. But that actually would require quite an overhaul of the funding system that we have, and that has been indicated already.
So, thank you. So I would like to round off a bit. I know that we've booked the 2 hours, but something that we all agreed on is that we don't necessarily need to use the 2 hours. And I'm thinking that, we've gone through a lot of the questions, and perhaps I would like to round off and do something, which is go through the panel again with one final question that I would like to ask each and every one of you. I'm going to go in reverse order now. So starting with you, Sylvia, if there was some advice that you would like to have given to your younger self in terms of the journey that you have had and in terms of the topic of this panel, what would that be?
Maybe I can tie it into, I think one of the questions I saw also, I do think there is this phenomenon, a lot of people in this panel, I think, and also in this, WASP. I mean, I think there's a difference in if you come here because you've been recruited here, or you happen to end up here out of coincidence, as you said, Amy. I did not choose Sweden for my career, sort of, and I think, and I do think that can be very hard because I think, as I said before, this sort of slightly reserved culture, or sometimes you're just very quickly viewed as another foreigner as having a hard time to get a job. And what I think I would say is, I wish I would have had a little bit more confidence when I was younger. And I think what I started off with, you will find people like you do in any other country that believe in you because they think you have something to offer. And I really think you should believe those people and go with those people, and rather than let the fact that because of this combination, and again, I know we're generalizing, but this combination of I think a very strong, very egalitarian society, a slightly reserved society, not easy always to penetrate. It makes you feel very invisible. It can at times make you feel very unimportant and invisible. And try not to let that get to you because it's not about you. And when you do see people who seek you out because they think you have something to offer, then really latch onto them.
Thank you. Thank you. Sandra.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. And I hope I will not sound too I don't know how to do. So if I look back at my choices and my career and my attitude and the way I build up things and how I thought about things, if I looked back from the person I am right now, I would have the tendency of, if I had to do what I did 10 years ago with the state of mind and the experience that I have right now, my tendency would be not to do it. I mean, not to take the decision to go and make these changes. Wait for, I mean, I would look at myself. So my old self would look at my new self as very rushy and very naive, as I said, but my advice actually to myself is never go into this trap. I mean, don't change anything. I mean, I wouldn't change anything of what I said, even though if I had to do this now, I might not do it. So I changed. I grew up as a leader, but I also lost a bit in during this journey. And now reflecting, maybe I should make sure. And I should have made sure in different occasions, probably, to be able to act as I was at the very beginning when I was not experienced. So what I said is very unclear, I'm sure, but my message is to develop, of course, to gain experience, but never lose yourself. And it's easy to do that in the name of experienced leader, or in the name of consensus, or this kind of words.
Yeah.
But it's probably not the best thing to do.
Yeah. And it was very clear. Thank you. Yeah. Joachim, what advice would you give to yourself, to your younger self?
No, I have to think back to my very young self when I came here. That is of course a challenge because it's such a long time ago. But I think my advice would be very similar as Sylvia's advice. Now, while Sylvia said she made travel from being an extrovert to more introvert person, I've certainly done the other way around. So I'm by personality I'm a rather introvert person. And in the course of the years and the career, you get more extrovert, at least if you go the path that I've been going. So what I would say from that perspective to my younger self is really, I mean, like, be open. Don't. I mean, just ask the questions. Talk to the people. I mean, they might not be prone to talk by themselves, but they will. If you start talking to them, they will talk to you. Even the Swedes will do that, and they will happily do that, and you will get tons of acquaintances and contacts that will happily share their lives with you even. So that would really be my recommendation to myself. Just go ahead.
Good. Ekta, how about you?
Yep, it's very similar to what Joachim said. So never hesitate to ask. Just ask, be curious. You want to learn Swedish? Learn. Nobody will explicitly tell you. Get to know about the culture, or just be informed about like how the things work in academia. So talk to your colleagues about it. Just don't hesitate. And sometimes I feel that we are the ones who are building a wall due to this hesitation that we have. So yeah, and also always talk if something is bothering you. I mean, I think everybody is here to help you out unless you speak about it. So just to give one last example, I spoke to my immediate manager about my desire to learn Swedish, and I'm receiving all the help possible to learn. the language and grow. And I'm so very happy about it. And it comes to the same point that don't hesitate to ask, just ask, and then you will receive all the help. So yeah, something to my self, I try to remind that.
Wonderful, thank you. And Aisha, the last word goes to you. And if you reflect back, perhaps to the first day when you started as a PhD student, or slightly before that, what advice would you give to yourself?
It's interesting because it's very similar to what the last two speakers said, Ekta and Joachim. Because like someone told this to me while I was doing my master's, if you don't ask, you would never know. So the worst you can get is an answer as a no. That's like could happen. But another thing I think is very important is when you start as a PhD, you have like this imposter feeling of like, I want to do all these things, so I may not know everything. But what I have realized is like your journey is different, like how you handle your every day in your PhD, or how you navigate like your career in academia is very different than what someone else did, or how many papers someone else is publishing or something. So try to define your own journey and do not like try to get stressed by what so many things other people are doing around you. So I think that's something I would like to just advise my young self.
Yeah, very good. So with that, I would like to extend a big thanks to all of you on the panel. Thank you for sharing both your personal experiences and your advices. And also thank you very much to the audience for asking your questions and for listening in this afternoon. So with that, thank you. And Pat, I will give the final word to you to close off this session.
Yes, and my big thanks goes to Amy for guiding us through these interesting discussions. And finally, a little of a personal testimony about what we have experienced. I mean, born and raised in Sweden, it's not a cultural difference in that sense for me, but I can recognize a lot of these born and raised on the countryside with my academic roots 8 generations back, and then away from the university. There are many of these invisible things. And what you put forward here is be curious, ask, and don't forget to be yourself. And that's an important basis for our continued strive to increase the knowledge and success of both research and our country as such. So by that, thank you very much, and wish you a nice weekend, which is coming soon.